What's good, fam? Happy Thursday. How you doing? Hopefully you are taking care of yourselves and you are well. As I said in the previous video, what we're going to be doing today is talking about team compositions, what they entail, and how to build them for yourself. A lot of people don't really have this information right now. I get a lot of questions. I know a lot of my friends get questions. What do I use for this trial? What do I use for that trial? Is this a good team? What's the best damage dealer? How can I tell if this unit's a tank? How can I tell if this unit's a good support? What's this do? What's that do? It's all mechanical parts of team comps that people are kind of hazy on. So fingers crossed that this information helps you build the teams you want to use when you want to build. You start clearing content. Also, fingers crossed, if anyone knows someone who asks these kinds of questions frequently, just show them this. Bada bing, couldn't be easier. So let's just jump right into it. Got a lot of ground to cover. Also, before I forget, I want to give a quick shout out to my boy Simple Mots. Hooked us up with this fly shirt. Man, I appreciate it, dog. So, wardrobe partially sponsored by Simple Mots on this one. Thanks, B.
Mission start.
Now, the first thing we want to do is identify how to determine what role a unit performs so that we can categorize them, and then that'll make it easier to break down how we go about filling the 5 slots on our team plus the friend unit. And we can do that by looking just beneath the base of a unit, and we'll see that, for example, 210 has a red sword, which means she's a physically offensive unit. She does physical damage, she's an attacker, and a green box with a white cross. And the cross means she's a healer. So we can deduce that if we were going to try to fill an offensive role or a healing role, a unit with those two icons would be what we want to put there. Now there's different icons for different roles, and you can see those right above me. Like I said, the red sword denotes a physical attacker, which usually scales with attack and hits against enemy's defense, but there are some exceptions to that. Physical tanks use a high defensive stat or physical evasion to mitigate physical damage taken by the party or by a single person through a couple of different tools, cover and provoke. But we'll talk more about that in just a little bit here. Magical attackers want to do damage that is, as it sounds, magical and hits against the enemy's spirit. Magical tanks are the same as physical tanks except for magical damage, nothing too big there. Buffers want to give you attack up, defense up. They want to increase your mitigations for physical damage, magical damage generally against all damage types. They do a couple things in that line. Debuffers want to make the enemy take more damage from physical damage, deal less physical damage themselves. They want to increase the amount of damage that you can deal to them with an element. Also, you can use blind and poison and that kind of thing. Healers want to heal you instantly or over time with healing over time spells. I've heard dots, damage over time abilities, referenced in other games. I don't know if hot heal over time is a term, but I'm going to be using it, so I'm YOLO. And then also, versatile is kind of interesting because it doesn't actually denote any job whatsoever. It just denotes that a unit has so many jobs that they don't list them all. I think the most that I have ever seen is 3 different jobs that don't include versatile, and then someone like Noctis, who we'll talk about in a little bit, he just says versatile because he does basically all of them. It's worth noting that not all units have every icon for the jobs they can perform either. Esther is a really good example of that because Esther says that she is both a physical attacker and also a tank, a physical tank in particular, but also she has the ability to break the enemy's stats. She has the ability to reduce the enemy's resistance to lightning. Both of those things would be debuff abilities, so you would think she would have the debuff icon. Not so much for whatever reason. Also, you would think that because she can buff her own attack very high, and also because she can buff her own limit burst damage very high, she might get the buffer role. I guess also not so much. Now, the reasons for those presumably are because her breaks are not that high. Most high breaks would be somewhere in the market of 70%. And then also, I can only assume because she can only buff herself and not anyone else that she's not a buffer. So there's a bit of a grain of salt to be taken for the fact that sometimes the unit won't have an icon and sometimes they will, based on how well the developers decide they can perform that job. And then there are units like Noctis where it says that he's versatile and it couldn't be more true. But at the same time, none of the roles that he performs as well as a unit that might dedicate themselves to only one or two roles in the first place. He has the ability to buff the attack, defense, magic, and spirit for the whole party, but they're tied to his limit burst. Okay, kind of questionable. Not necessarily guaranteed 100 uptime unless you build very specifically to make that happen, and if you're doing that, you might as well just include a real buffer. Also, he can inflict status ailments on the enemy, he can lower the enemy's attack, defense, magic, and spirit, and because of his built-in evasion, he's a very powerful provoke tank, using his ability Fish to draw all the single target damage to himself, and any of it that's physical, if you build evasion, will just disappear. Got him. Easy peasy. So there are some things that he can do as well as dedicated units, some things he can't, and because he covers so many roles, it just assigns him versatile, even though it's only like 80% true. And with those two caveats in mind, I think we're about ready to go ahead, get into the actual aspect of team building, how you can do it, what roles you need to cover for what, and why. Because we understand what the roles are now, and that's the real foundation, you know what I'm saying? We had to set it out so we could build the house. And when you're deciding what kind of team you're going to build, there's a couple of things to consider. The most primary of which is what kind of content are you actually trying to beat? That's going to be the thing that determines everything. If you're just in the normal world story, you can kind of get away with not having a tank and not having a healer. You can just take like 2 strong damage dealers, a breaker, and 2 anythings and just kill it all. It doesn't matter. But if you're going to go and do trials, you're going to want really specialized things per fight. And each time they're going to give you little in-game information bits that you can use to kind of decide where to start. For example, say you wanted to fight the new Chaotic Darkness that just came out. If we go and click on it in the Vortex, we'll see this little strategy button. And it has some interesting information that we can use to further educate ourselves on how to build a team that would approach this enemy. Most primarily, it says right off the bat that the enemy uses water and dark magic attacks, so we already know 2 things have to be on our team, a spirit buffer and a magic tank. We also know that the magic tank needs elemental resist, specifically water and dark. It's weak to light, so use light attacks when darkness is gathering to make this foe flinch, then follow it up with some more light attacks to deal maximum damage. So we know that our damage dealers have to have light weapons or light magic. And then also it has attacks that inflict poison, blind, and paralysis, so be sure to have a method to deal with those status ailments. So everyone needs to be wearing a ribbon or discernment or some ribbon discernment type effect that gives them immunity. Because we know that it is a thing in the game that sometimes enemies will lower your ability to resist status ailments, we probably want someone who can give a ribbon buff. These are things that we already know as a checklist in our head. Okay, right off the bat, these need to be approached no matter what kind of team we're building. As another example, we can take a look at Scorn of Lich, a very recent trial. We'll click on Strategy. A powerful enemy that uses fire, ice, and lightning magic, as well as attacks that can inflict instant KO. Okay, so right off the bat we can discern a couple of things without even getting into the fight. Again, we need an elementally resistant magic tank, specifically fire, ice, and lightning. Also, we need to have death immunity, or a way to deal with a unit dying instantly. It's going to look like re-raise in a lot of instances. At the end of the turn, it'll announce what attack I'll use the following turn, so determine that's fine. Its 2 instant KO attacks are Death and Kill, the latter first nullifying resistance before inflicting instant KO. So we know that Death Resist is off the table, but re-raise is still in. It begins to use Kill more frequently in the second half of the battle. We know that that's the one that immediately kills you whether you're resistant or not. So because we have to deal with these 2, we know that we do not need to worry about death because, obviously, if we are having to live through kill, which we cannot resist, then whatever we're doing to live through kill will also work on death. In other words, we should not plan to use death resist to make it through death, because we will not get to use that luxury against kill. So prepare to methods of revival. It can also inflict silence, so prepare methods to cure silence as well. So again, we need a ribbon effect. So we've already gotten 3 very clear indicators of what we need to be building right off the bat. Also, it's worth noting that every single time there is ever a fight where you're using a magic tank, you also want to use a provoke tank. You want to be able to provoke physical attacks off of your units onto one very specific target usually with evasion or very high defense. Even stuff that isn't listed in the actual text, we can already glean for ourselves. It doesn't say we need a provoke tank, but we know that we have a physical attacks to worry about, and we have a magical cover tank, which means we cannot physically cover because you can only have one active at a time. So what's the other way to deal with physical damage? A provoker. Bada bing. So we can put together these little strings of logic to already have several filled in points of our team comp before we even get to the point where we're building anything. Now, as a couple of brief examples, just while we wrap things up, because we said most of what we have to say in this video is already long enough. I'm not trying to be that 45-minute content guy. Teams you could look at, as long as you know that the mechanics of the fight you want to do will allow it, you can mix and match kind of whatever you want within the parameters of the roles that we've already determined. So we have like cover tank, damage dealer, provoker who also has some breaks, a healer with re-raise, and then also we have a buffer that gives mitigations. There's a little bit of elemental resist here, but obviously you have a bunch of espers and your gear can make up for things too. Do magic cover and a damage dealer, plus the provoke take who is also a breaker. And then we also have the buffer healer as the same unit. And then over here we have just a general support with mitigations, also more buffs, plus like elemental imbues and that kind of thing. And obviously we're assuming that our friend unit is going to be able to cover whatever we're missing also. So in this instance it'd be another damage dealer because I like to keep all the utility within my own party. Same here, it'd just be another damage dealer to chain with Queen. We could get really wacky and have like Queen is our is a dodge unit, so she can be our MP battery, and then Rivera and Inacol give her provoke and cover, so now she's a Kiraga spamming side heal MP battery that also is our cover provoke tank. So we have two Esters just like doing all the damage, and then Myra's over here for like buffs and healing, plus the ribbon effect. Like you can get super wild, and it like doesn't even matter as long as you know like what the fight does. This kind of stuff can fly because you have so much liberty to just like flex your insane knowledge. You can be like, okay, well, I know that every attack I'm going to take is either physical or magical single target. It's either physical AoE or magical single target, and we can just put a bunch of dodge and spirit on Queen, and she has that massive self buff 300% spirit. She has a lot of HP. We have re-raise. Might as well YOLO and use like do things like this, and this probably would work out. Same thing, as long as you know like, okay, well, if we go in there, as long as this magical damage we can either elementally mitigate or just kind of face tank with the fact that our buffs and re-raise are massive. Plus he has built-in re-raise, he has damage mitigation anyway from Sylvia and his limit burst. Like, there's so many things covered that obviously on a fight-to-fight basis, as long as we know what we need to watch out for, like, we can just plan for it and be fine. And that's hopefully what you can take knowing from this video and apply that yourself. So just as a brief recap, a couple of things that we want to make sure we know: what the roles actually are. We also want to make sure we know to check the strategy for what kind of roles we want to take to the fight. And we know that taking something to the fight that makes sense for the mechanics we're going to encounter is the most important thing. Obviously there's the wiki, so you can check out what units do if you don't have all the information offhand, and you can check out what bosses do there too. So when I say check the strategy, you could check strategy guide in game, like clicking the little Moogle icon, or you could check the wiki too, either or. There's so much information out there that you can either gain from the battle, like you go in, you'd like take a couple of shots, oh, I guess I died to something that didn't get covered by my magic tank, which means it's either a fixed attack or a physical attack. Try it with a physical tank, hey, we made it, or you die, in which case it's a fixed attack. So now you know a couple of things. Okay, there's uncoverable damage in this fight, we shouldn't use a cover tank. Like, it's a matter of assessing what is giving you trouble and then making sure you know how to use the tools that will get you around that problem. Alright, but if you have any questions, you want to clarify something, you want to know a little bit more, you can go ahead and ask in the comments. You can ask on Twitch. You can ask on Discord. You can DM me on Twitter. You can tag me on Twitter. Do whatever you gotta do. Follow the socials. Get my attention. I'll make sure I answer any questions you guys got. We're going to be live tonight, as always, Thursday through Sunday, 10 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, all the way up until 2 or later a.m. So catch me whenever you get the chance. Hopefully this is helpful for you, my friends. I will see you tonight. Take care of yourselves. We out. Peace.
Wait a second. A new opponent has interrupted the tournament.